Page 34. Confederation. British North America was made up of 5 colonies: Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. All had their own governments. By 1864, the British government began to work with representatives from British North America to create a new country. The maritime colonies of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island had already decided that they wanted to talk about a union. They planned a meeting in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, in 1864. Leaders from Canada, Sir Etienne Pascal Toche, Sir George Etienne Cartier, George Brown, and Sir John A. Macdonald, thought that it would be better if all of the British colonies joined together, so they decided to go to the meeting too. They came with a plan that they presented to the representatives from the Maritimes. They all agreed to another meeting in Quebec City to figure out the details. This time, Newfoundland decided to go to the meeting as well. There was a lot of talking and arguing at the Quebec conference. The delegates did come up with a plan for a constitution, but some of the representatives from the Maritimes were not happy. They were afraid that the new country would be dominated by the larger United Canada. Finally, in 1866, the colonies of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia decided to form a single country. Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland decided not to join. The government of Great Britain passed the British North America Act, BNA, in 1867. And on July 1st, 1867, the Dominion of Canada was born. Sir William Tilley, a father of Confederation from New Brunswick, picked the name from a Bible verse about having dominion from sea to sea. Prince Edward Island decided to become part of Canada 6 years later in 1873. Newfoundland did not join Canada until 1949. The first Prime Minister of Canada was Sir John A. Macdonald. Macdonald's picture used to be on the $10 bill. At present, Sir Wilfrid Laurier, the first French-Canadian Prime Minister, is on the $5 bill. This is a picture of the Dominion of Canada in 1867. You can see that it takes in part of the current province of Ontario, north of the Great Lakes, a large part of Quebec, and then New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. You can also see Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland that joined the Confederation later. Adding to the West. In 1870, Canada began to expand further west. The Hudson's Bay Company had controlled the northwest region of Canada for almost 200 years. In 1867, the Hudson Bay Company sold the rights to this land to Canada. There were more than 12,000 Métis living near the Red River on land that would become Manitoba. Neither they nor the Aboriginal peoples were asked if they wanted to join Canada. If they were going to be part of this new country, the Métis wanted to have a province with their own language and religious rights like the rest of Canada. They did not want to join Canada as a territory. Louis Riel led a rebellion to get these rights. He and Gabriel Dumont took control of Fort Garry, now Winnipeg. Ottawa sent soldiers, and Riel escaped to the United States. The Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, agreed to the Métis' demands, and the province of Manitoba, just a small corner of today's Manitoba, and the Northwest Territories entered Canada. Great Britain made the Arctic Islands part of the Northwest Territories in 1880. The Yukon Territory became a separate territory in 1898 when many people moved there after gold was discovered. After the Métis Rebellion, Prime Minister Macdonald decided that it would be best to have a police force to keep peace in the new territories and to negotiate with the Indians. He created the Northwest Mounted Police. They built forts in different parts of the big, new Northwest Territory. These forts later became towns and cities like Fort Macleod, Fort Calgary, and Fort Edmonton. One important hero of the Northwest Mounted Police was Sam Steele. As new settlers began to move west, the Métis and Indians felt threatened again. In 1885, Louis Riel led another rebellion, this time in Saskatchewan. He was defeated and executed, but he is still seen as a defender of Métis rights. Today, Louis Riel is considered a hero, especially to the Métis and First Nations people. British Columbia, a small British colony on the west coast, joined Canada in 1871. It had been a British colony for many years. Most of the people lived on Vancouver Island in the capital city of Victoria. Very few British lived on the mainland. Because of this, people... Here we see pictures of Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont. Because of this, people from the western United States wanted to move north and claim the land. The people of British Columbia knew that they could not stay independent for long, mostly for economic reasons. They had to decide whether to join Canada or the United States. They asked the Canadian government if Canada would build a road to link British Columbia with eastern Canada. Canada did better and promised to build a railroad. This was one of the reasons British Columbia decided to join Canada. The railroad was finally finished in November 1885. The completion of the railroad was the fulfillment of a promise to the people of British Columbia. It was also a source of great pride for Canada and a powerful symbol of Canadian unity. The new railway also brought thousands of new settlers to Western Canada. While the building of the railroad from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean was a great accomplishment for Canada, there is a part of the story that does not make Canadians proud. Much of the hard and dangerous work on the railway was done by Chinese workers. These workers were not treated fairly. They had to pay a head tax to get into Canada to work, and they were not allowed to become citizens. The government of Canada apologized to the descendants of the Chinese workers in 2006. In the 1890s and early 1900s, more than 2 million British and American people immigrated to Canada. But the vast prairie region did not attract many settlers. Most immigrants wanted to live in cities in the eastern regions. Sir Wilfrid Laurier, the first French-Canadian Prime Minister, wanted the prairies to become settled. He encouraged immigrants from other parts of Europe, especially Poles, Ukrainians, Germans, Norwegians, and Swedes, to move to Western Canada and start farms. By 1905, there were enough people in the West to make Manitoba bigger and to make 2 new provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta. Finally, in 1949, Newfoundland and Labrador joined Confederation, and the country was complete. On page 38, we see a map of Canada from 1905, and it looks fairly complete and similar to what we see today. The questions are, 1, what does Confederation mean? 2, in what year did the Confederation of Canada take place? Number 3, what document made Confederation legal? 4, what does the phrase Dominion from sea to sea mean? 5, what provinces first joined together to create Canada?